When God stops warning, the earth shakes. There is a moment wholly chilling, irreversible, when heaven draws a line. You may not hear thunder, you may not see lightning, but your spirit knows something has shifted. You've tried, oh, how you've tried, you turned the other cheek, you prayed, until your voice cracked, you hoped, until your heart bled. For the narcissist who deceived you, used you, discarded you, you offered chance after chance, grace upon grace. You believed in the possibility of redemption until redemption became nothing more than a trap to pull you back into torment. And now heaven is silent no more. There are no more subtle signs, no more gentle whispers, no more warnings. Because when God says enough, it is not just a word, it's a heavenly, the verdict. The same God who was patient now becomes the God who vindicates. And when vindication comes, it doesn't come slowly, it arrives like a storm, swift, exact, unstoppable. What the world calls karma, the faithful recognizes divine retribution. This isn't just their downfall. This is the unraveling of the wicked, the response of a holy God to unrepentant cruelty. You are not here by accident. This message has found you because God is already moving the narcissist who wounded you will not escape their mask, will not protect them their charm, will not shield them. They sow destruction, and now they will reap it in full. So if you felt that shift, if you sense something spiritual rising while your enemies grow restless, stay with me. Because what you're witnessing now is not coincidence, it's instant karma authored by the hand of justice itself. The season of mercy is over. God has seen enough. Mercy is a sacred thread woven into the fabric of God's heart. It is the gentle extension of his hand when we least deserve it, the space he gives us to repent, to return, to be restored. But there is a truth that many dare not speak aloud. Mercy is not infinite when it is marked, when it is trampled, when it is taken as a license to harm others without consequence. And the narcissists, they didn't just cross the line, they danced on it. They built their pride upon your pain. They used your forgiveness as fuel for further destruction. They interpreted your silence as surrender, your prayers as weakness, your long suffering as proof that they were untouchable. But here's what they never understood: God was watching the whole time. He watched you endure the slow erosion of your soul while you still held out hope. He saw the nights you laid awake trying to understand how someone could love so cruelly. He counted every tear you buried, every apology you gave that wasn't owed, every time you swallowed your own voice to keep the peace. He heard the lies they spread about you. He watched them charm crowds, gain sympathy, play the victim, while he was silently bleeding behind the scenes. And he waited because God is not impulsive. He gives space for repentance. He sends warning after warning, through conviction, through disruptions, through people who speak truth into the storm. But when none of that is, he did, when a person repeatedly chooses deceit over humility, pride over surrender, harm over healing, the mercy lifts the silence, ends, the gavel drops, because judgment against an evil deed is not executed speedily. The heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Ecclesiastes 8:11. The narcissist believed that delay meant escape, that since God didn't strike them immediately, he must not be concerned. But divine timing is never driven by human expectation, it's governed by thick knowledge and righteous fire. And now that fire has been lit, no more warnings, no more chances, no more. Maybe they'll change. The era of grace has ended for them, and the consequences are unfolding with holy precision. You don't need to defend yourself anymore. You don't need to explain what they did to you. God is doing it for you. The tables are turning. The protection they once had from your prayers, your covering, your intercession is gone. They are now standing alone, unguarded, unrepentant, and fully exposed to the justice of the one they mocked through their treatment of you. They didn't just offend you, they provoked God. They didn't just mistreat you, they mishandled a vessel of grace. And when you mistreat what God has anointed, you don't answer to people and you answer to heaven. And heaven has spoken. This is not karma as the world sees it. This is divine alignment where every seed they sowed and deception and pain is now sprouting before their very eyes. This is heaven's justice, and it does not come late, it comes right on time. And as that justice begins to unfold, it doesn't creep quietly in the background, it manifests boldly, visibly, in a for many call instant karma, but we recognize as the direct hand of God. Instant karma, the divine principle that cannot be escaped. What do you do when you've given your all and the person you loved used it as a weapon? When every act of compassion was twisted and every effort to keep peace was exploited, what do you do when the evil isn't loud and obvious, but subtle, calculated, cloaked in smiles and charm? You wait not in defeat, but in expectation, because there is a principle written not in ink, but in eternity. A law that no narcissist, no manipulator, no deceiver can outrun. The world may call it karma, but we as believers know the truth. It is the immutable law of sowing and reaping, and it is not optional. It is divine. Glacier 6:7 proclaims it plainly. Do not be deceived. God is not marked for whatsoever a man, so with that shall he also reap. This is not a threat. It's a spiritual law, as real and inescapable as gravity, and when you've suffered under the hat and of someone who thought they could manipulate, lie, gaslight, and destroy you without consequence, this law becomes your shelter. The narcissists believed they had escaped justice. Their lies went unchallenged, that betrayals unpunished, the cruelty overlooked. They convinced themselves they were invincible because for a time it seemed like nothing touched them. But the delay of justice is not the absence of it. You see, God lets things grow, even seeds of evil. He allows time to expose what is hidden deep beneath the surface. He allows the harvest to mature until it is undeniable, until it is so obvious, so overwhelming that the very people who once believed. The narcissists begin to see the truth without you saying a single word. That's what instant karma looks like in God's hands. It's visible correction, swift exposure, undeniable consequence. And it starts the moment heaven says enough. What they once did in secret now comes back multiplied. The fear, the confusion, the isolation they forced on you, they now feel it pressing down on them. The games they played to gain control on now spinning out of their control. Their relationships become unstable. Their image begins to shatter. Their words no longer hold power, and worst of all, they can't figure out why, because the punishment isn't coming through human hands. It's not a legal charge. It's not public revenge. It's deeper, it's spiritual disintegration. Their plans begin to fail, the charm begins to fade, people begin to see consistency, is begin to feel discomfort around them. The very foundation they built their false self upon, manipulation, deception, ego, begins to crack. This is not karma driven by the universe. This is karma directed by the sovereignty of God. And the narcissist doesn't know how to handle that because for so long they controlled the timing, they controlled the narrative, they controlled you. But they do not control this. This is divine territory now. And when God takes over, there is no reset button. No charm powerful enough, no gaslight bright enough to blind what's being revealed, the worst part for them. They're not involved in it, and you're not retaliating. You're not explaining, you're not even watching closely. You've handed it over to God, and He is acting without delay. That's why it's called instant, because it may have felt like nothing for a long time. And then suddenly the tide shifts, you feel peace again. You feel clarity, you feel lighter, and they feel exposed, a lot stripped of their power. Psalm 37:12 through 13 reminds us the wicked plots against the righteous and gnashes his teeth at him, but the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he sees that his day is coming, that day has come. And you're not the one bringing it. God is. This is the moment where the scales balance, where all their false victories crumble, where all the energy they took from others no longer feeds them, where all the masks fall and truth, pure, radiant, undeniable truth, takes center stage. You no longer have to fight, you no longer have to prove anything, because what was done to you is now being echoed back to them, and it's being delivered from the throne of justice itself. If you feel this shift, if peace is returning to you while chaos seems to chase them, comment below. God is not marked. Let the heavens bear witness that you trusted in His timing and His hand has moved. But as the consequences begin to surround them, it won't just be external. The greatest punishment isn't what they lose in the world, it's what they lose within. When the divine justice moves from exposure to isolation, when masks for how the narcissist faces public humiliation, for years, maybe decades, they walk through life untouched. Untouched by remorse, untouched by accountability, untouched by the consequences they rightly deserved. The narcissist didn't just manipulate situations, they rewrote entire narratives. They didn't just hurt people, they convinced others that you have the one doing the damage. They twisted stories, weaponized truth, and presented their cruelty as righteousness. They built an empire not of love, not of legacy, but of lies, and for a time it worked. People believed them, respected them, followed them. They were praised in public for the same traits that devastated you in private. That deception was thorough, and that charm intoxicating. You tried to speak up, but your voice was buried beneath their performance. And yet God never looked away, though the world applauded. Heaven recorded every word, every manipulation, every time they made you question your sanity, every time they made you the villain in your own story. God gathered it all, not to condemn you, but to prepare a public record of what was done in secret. Because is the truth, God is not only the healer of the brokenhearted, He is the defender of the falsely accused. Luke 12:3 declares, there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What you have said in dark will be heard in the daylight. The narcissist thought their charm would protect them. They thought their silence, their connections, their performance would shield them. But when God moves into a situation, even applause cannot drown out the sound of truth. And now the mask is slipping. It doesn't happen all at once. At first, it's small, a friend who starts to distance, a coworker who no longer laughs at their jokes, a relative who starts asking questions they can't answer. Then it spreads. Their lies begin to contradict, their stories become inconsistent, their eyes one, confident and commanding, now dart with panic. You see, masks weren't made to endure the presence of light. And when the light of God begins to shine, every carefully constructed illusion melts beneath the heat of truth. The narcissist begins to unravel, their social circle collapses, their name is no longer spoken with admiration, but suspicion. That image, so carefully cultivated, starts to crack. But this isn't merely a social consequence. This is a spiritual reckoning, because God doesn't just bring the truth to light. He makes sure the right people see it. He reveals it to the very audience that once praised them. He allows their exposure to happen not in a corner, but on the stage they built with pride. And that is the justice of heaven. They are falling from the very platform they used to you. It's not just public humiliation, it's a sacred unraveling, a stripping away of false power. The narcissist is no longer in control of the narrative of people or of themselves. They are disoriented, they scramble to recover their image, they reach for old tricks, the gaslighting, the guilt, the charm, but it no longer works. What, because the anointed has shifted for years? You are the one under spiritual attack, but now you are the one covered. You are the one protected. You are the one rising as they fall, and as you remain silent, healed, distant, heaven is speaking on your behalf. The narcissist's fall is not just visible, it's prophetic, is a warning to of. This is a cleansing for the environment they once poisoned. It is a message from heaven that says, I saw what they did to you, and I will not let it stand. And here's the deeper truth. They are not just losing people, they are losing spiritual supply, that constant validation, that endless admiration, that audience they fed on like leeches. It is gone. They stand alone now, not because you cursed them, but because God has cut off their access. This is the spiritual starvation of a narcissist. They are isolated not because they are misunderstood, but because the truth has finally caught up. The very people they fooled now see the fruits of their behavior, and fruit never lies. God has flipped the script. No longer a you question. They are no longer are you on trial. They are no longer are you losing, they are. And as their mask shatters, their cries become louder, not cries of repentance, but of desperation, because they don't want restoration. They want control, and control once lost becomes their torment. But you don't need to retaliate. You don't need to rejoice in their downfall. You just need to walk in the light, because God has already written your vindication. Psalm 23:5 says, You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. This is that moment your table is set, their throne is empty, and all the world begins to see the difference between performance and purity, between manipulation and meekness, between narcissism and true righteousness. But the deepest punishment is still to come, not public, not social, but internal, because when God removes his hand, what's left does not just emptiness, it's spiritual isolation. And that is where the soul begins to collapse from within. Divine isolation. When God removes all their sources of supply, there is a punishment more crushing than exposure. It does not make headlines, it doesn't stir crowds or call for public attention. It happens quietly, but with a force that shakes the soul. It is when God withdraws his hand and leaves the narcissist completely and utterly alone. Not just physically, but spiritually. This is divine isolation, and it is the most terrifying form of justice a person can experience. The narcissist is a master of image. For years, they thrived of admiration, control, and constant validation. People were not companions. As they were sources, they were tools to draw energy from, to keep the narcissist emotionally fed. Everything was transactional, even love. And yet you were different. You gave without expecting. You prayed for them. You interceded for them. You saw glimpses of the wounded soul beneath the cold exterior, and you believed in the miracle of change. You tried, you stayed, you covered them spiritually and emotionally, even when they stripped you of yourself. But the narcissist never saw your presence as a gift from God. They saw you as weak. They saw your covering as entitlement. They assumed your protection of them was permanent, that your mercy was their possession. Realize that you are not the source God was. And when God lifts his grace, when he removes the protection he extended through you, the narcissist is left exposed not just to the world, but to the void within themselves. A true punishment begins when God stops sending people for them to use. When every connection begins to dry up, when conversations grow awkward, when doors that once opened easily begin to shut, when the same tactics that once drew attention now repel it, this is not the natural course of life. It is the divine recalibration of the spiritual atmosphere. And it is terrifying to someone whose identity was always externally constructed. They don't know who they are without admiration, without control, without someone to dominate or emotionally drain. The confidence begins to erode, that charm fails. They become desperate, reaching for old methods that no longer work, reconnecting with people who now see through them, chasing new victims who sense danger and walk away. And in the silence that follows, they are confronted by the one voice. Nice they can't gaslight. Their own God has now turned their world inward. The applause is gone, the attention is gone, the distraction is gone, and what remains is an empty throne where their ego once ruled. But what makes divine isolation so severe is not just the absence of people, it is the absence of God's active patience. The warmth of opportunity is gone, the chance to change gone. The still small voice quieted. What remains is the cold echo of consequences they created themselves. In Romans 1, we are told of those whom God gave over to their depraved mind. This is not wrath in the form of fire, it is wrath in the form of silence. And for the narcissist, silence is unbearable. When God removes the people, the platform, and the power, he also removes the illusion, and now they see themselves not the version they project, but the truth they've always avoided, the brokenness, the emptiness, the spiritual void they kept hidden even from themselves. This is where judgment becomes personal, because while external exposure ruins reputation, internal isolation shatters the soul. There's no one left to blame, no one left to charm, no one left to distract them from the ruin they built. Their world collapses from the inside out, not because you cursed them, but because God removed himself. You see, God's greatest judgment is not thunder from heaven. It's when he says, I will no longer strive with you, when he removes the voices that pleaded with them, when he silences conviction, when he no longer delays what they've long deserved. That is divine abandonment, not eternal, not final, but corrective. It is the moment when God allows the narcissist to feel what they made others feel. It is justice that mirrors the pain they caused, but delivers it in spiritual solitude. And while they fall deeper into themselves, you rise, not because you tried to bring them down, but because you finally let go and let God be the one who brings order. Divine isolation is not just punishment for the narcissist, it is freedom for you. It is the moment heaven says, you don't have to hold the burden anymore, I am handling it now. But even as the narcissist spirals in silence, God is not finished, because when the tables turn in heaven's courtroom, he not only defends his children, he vindicates them. And that is where your rise begins. Your rise after the for God's vindication is your reward. For every season of injustice, there comes a season of reversal. For every tear that was hidden, there comes a moment where God puts his hand on your shoulder and says, now, I will show them who you are. When God finishes dealing with the narcissist, he doesn't leave you in the same valley where you are attacked. He doesn't just remove the storm, he raises you above it. This is not survival. This is not just walking away with wounds and memories. This is your resurrection moment, your vindication, your reward for trusting Him when it didn't make sense. For so long, your life felt like a battlefield. You are fighting to be believed, fighting to stay sane, fighting to keep your dignity while they strip you down emotionally, spiritually, even socially. And yet you didn't collapse. Not because He was strong, but because God was holding your frame while your spirit groaned in silence. You see, vindication doesn't begin when the narcissist falls, it begins when you start rising and realize you're not the same person anymore. You're stronger, quieter,